like to ask the veterans from Vietnam to come next. Per Odman, a real volunteer who fought at Khe Sanh in 1969, 68.
Today is a different kind of Memorial Day. It's not a government Memorial Day. And I don't know if many people have said that, and I think a lot of people have said it, but I repeat it. More than 3 million people died during the Vietnam War. About 97% were Vietnamese out of these 3+ million. 2% were Americans. And I want to add something that to me, and I think to all of us, is very important, and that is that for every death, there were several wounded, burned, poisoned, fucked up in so many ways, and who suffered. They survived their wounds, their burns, the poison, but they lived a horrible life, many of them. And that life was maybe worse than being killed. So I honor today not only the 3 million plus that died in the Vietnam War, but also honor the many, many millions of primarily Vietnamese, of course, who suffered enormously for the rest of their lives. And with dioxin, it continues in the second, third, and fourth generation. So that's where my carnation is going to be given.
Jan Berry, Jan, I think you might have been there before most of us who are standing here and came back to report about the horrors of the United States in Vietnam. Thank you, Jan, and we'll give you a flower.
Thank you. I'm going to toss this flower in the name of Jeff Charlotte, who was a friend of mine way back in the early days of VBAW. Thanks for everybody who came here and joined us today.
I want to honor 2 people. Matty Matson, my father-in-law, who fought with the Abraham Lincoln Battalion in the Spanish Civil War, and for Dennis McGuire, killed in Vietnam.
Just wanted to remember that the first casualty is the truth, the second casualty is mostly civilians. While we mourn the military deaths, we know that when you wear the uniform, there's a possibility of you not making it home. I'd like to remember some friends, Kevin McGuire in Staten Island, right out there in the Bay. David Klein, longtime friend, and 2 that we lost recently. It'll be Frank Montella and Mike Gold. So, presente.
I want to dedicate this to 2 veterans of different wars. Both were wounded and died years after their injuries, but both of them never had a day pain-free, both physical and mental. The first is Sam Milwitsky, who was wounded in Belgium in 1944, U.S. Army, and was a great high school athlete, drafted at the age of 18, a great high school athlete at Christopher Columbus High School in the Bronx. Was never able to play baseball again and never had a pain-free day for the rest of his life. The other Iraq War veteran, U.S. Army veteran, Thomas Young, who we know from Body of War, was wounded, I think, his first or second day in Iraq, and also never had a pain-free day for the rest of his life. So I dedicate this flower to both of these great veterans.
My first husband, Peter Crawford, Transport Company 440, Mekong Delta, 1969. His soul died in Vietnam. His body died some years later, and this is in his memory. My son, who signed up for the military when he was 19, he was deployed to Afghanistan in 2013 for 15 months. Two of his good friends, Daniel Rodriguez and Jose Reyes, were killed in Afghanistan, and he just texted me to remember Christine Taylor. He says she was a good soldier, one of the few women to die in combat, a single mother who left behind 2 children. He served with her, my son Daniel, in the 101st, and she died, she was killed by a suicide bomber in Afghanistan also.
My name is Rose McPartland, and I'd like to honor a dear friend, Veterans for Peace, who we've lost, and I loved very much, and miss Frank Wagner. And I also wanted to remember somebody in my family, Marine Lieutenant Chaplain Father Guy I. McPartland, who I loved very much and miss a lot. And James is going to say something about Frank.
Yeah, just again for our good friend Frank Wagner, who was an instrumental part of my life in the world of art. A great Vietnam vet. Frank Wagner.
Subha Kim.
I dedicate for more than 3 million killed in the Korean War, especially my 2 uncles and 2 sisters, 2 cousins, and my sister.
I wanted to remember 2 people. Frank Stern, who was a Vietnam veteran, who most of you know, and who always lit us up with his smile. He was a tank commander in Vietnam, and he died a few years ago. And another one I want to remember was someone who died a while back. He was an Afghan veteran. You might know him. He was a singer. He was an anti-war activist. He rode his bicycle all over this country, singing anti-war songs. He was a hero to many. He was an Afghan vet, 2 tours, and he took his own life. And he took his own life after Obama, right after Obama declared the surge, because the second surge in Afghanistan, because I think it destroyed hope in him. So I blame Obama for his death also. And I remember Jacob George. He was a wonderful, wonderful young human being with a life to live that he needed to live.
Hi, I dedicate this flower to all the people who perished during the Battle of Okinawa. And 14,000 American soldiers lost their lives. And all of their names will be read in June with all 240,000 people, including Okinawan people, civilians, and Japanese soldiers, everybody, Korean people, Taiwanese people, everybody had to be there and gave their lives. And I thank Veterans for Peace and all of these people who always support for peace for Okinawa, and also actually it's a peaceful world. And the other day we were doing some rally in front of the New York Public Library, and I heard some passerby, oh, what they're doing, that's an old war, 77 years ago. I would love if I agree, but that's not true. The war is not over yet. All the bases are still there, and under this situation, and even Japanese people are forced to believe that militarization weapons are the mean security for them. and we have to say no. We cannot make that Okinawa battlefield again. We have to keep the faith, peace in Asia and in the world. So I just want to dedicate for flower, and I want to say, you know, the peace is there. Rest in peace, rest in peace. But I cannot say. But we pledge that, you know, we keep working to do our best to try that never make Okinawa a battlefield again. So thank you, everybody.
I want to dedicate this to the civilians who've died in the wars that have been committed by the United States, and to my friend's son, Sergeant First Class Tyler Westbrook, who was in the Special Forces and was in several wars, Iraq, Afghanistan, and elsewhere, and took his life by suicide. Tyler Moore, presente. Tyler Westbrook, presente.
Hello everyone, this is the greatest opportunity, a blessing in my life. I'm last of the baby boomers, but I just know that there's been generations of people that died so I can live. There's been wars going on for centuries, and I've been advocating for the veterans, even for homelessness, literally the last, oh God, I think since 15, I'm 58, and I know that because there's been 3 generations to 4 generations, even more in my family. Alexander Lincoln Watts, the first, the second. His son is still surviving now. He's a veteran, but there's a lot of danger, you know, to his health at this time for serving. But I just want to let you all know that I will let this next generation know that the battle that was fought was won in spirit and in love, and that we're going to make sure this next generation, my kids are 36 and 40, I have 5 grands, and their children, their children, their children, and many seeds after that are going to know the sacrifice that was made for them. They need to understand this cannot just disappear. So what? It was 100 years, 77 years. When I say so what, that's what they say. So I tell the millennials, the Generation X and the Alphas and the ones that's behind them, you need some brick and mortar into your cyber. Okay, but we will not let this just disappear and disappear as if it never existed. We love you all. I thank you all.
I'm here to help us remember 2 stalwarts in our struggle. One is Mo Fishman, who was a veteran of the Spanish Civil War and a member of Chapter 34. The other person I want to remember is Bill Gilson. He was the president of this chapter at one time. I'm wearing his Veterans for Peace dog tag, and I want to remember that he was always there when Veterans for Peace asked him to be there. You would always see him. Sometimes I was with him and sometimes I was not, but he was very, very strong until he became ill. But I thank you all for being here. Yeah, where do I get to? You think I can do that? Mo Fishman, presente! Bill Gilson, presente!
My brother Fritz, who passed away last August, was 99. He was in the Marine Corps. He enlisted in 43. He was in college, but he loved the uniform. And he was a party boy. He came out of the war, having served in Guam, never spoke about it, went through 3 marriages, ended up a Buddhist. He would feel very much at home with everybody who is here. He came to love peace. The only time he spoke about what happened on Guam was during Abu Ghraib. And then he just said very little to me. I was living in New York. He was on the West Coast, and he said he saw torture being done to the Japanese, and he objected, which caused some trouble, but he never spoke more about it. So, Fritz Ellis, presente.
Today, I carry the millions of people that wore uniforms as well as did not. But most of all, I want to commemorate my teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, who taught us that veterans could be for peace. And so everyone that burns so brightly alongside, I just thank you in the first rose of the season for my garden.
All right. Thich Nhat Hanh presente.
Thank you. For some who may not know, Thich Nhat Hanh was a Buddhist monk who said that veterans are the light at the end of the candle that will light our way to peace. So thank you for saying something in his memory.
So I want to remember my very young neighbor, Ryan Tejeda, who lived in Washington Heights near me, a young Dominican boy, and there's a recruiting station right across the way from his house, and of course he went in and joined the Marines, and he died early on in the Iraq War in 2003. They made him into a big hero and tried to use it as a recruiting tool for the rest of the kids in the neighborhood and tell people that they would get citizens' rights if they joined. And we learned later that he was killed by a device, by one of those IEDs, and actually wasn't in combat at all, which either way is horrific. And he had his picture up, and he was a very slender, very young-looking Dominican young Marine with a hat that looked much too large for him and the sad expression on his face. And we had the candles and the flowers, and his stepfather sat there all the time, and I would pass by on my way to the gym, and there they were. And we won't get him back, and we won't get back a lot of the kids from my neighborhood, a lot of the young Latino kids, a lot of the black folks, the people of color have been targeted. So I'll say presente to everybody.
On this day of remembering, I'm thinking of all the veterans who are wandering around the streets of our city, scarred and wounded, and that's carrying a death inside them. I'm wondering who will reach out and help them live a life, provide them basics of food and housing. I'm remembering them. I'm thinking of John McNeil, Father John McNeil, a Jesuit, who was a veteran of World War II, joined at 17, having been promised the sun, the moon, and the stars, and never got over the horrors of what he experienced. But like also his dear friend Phil Berrigan, who took that experience of war and, like all of you, brought that horror of war and turned it into a passion for peace until the day they died. And last, I just want to remember my father, Peter Fay, who in Ireland was a young fella who also signed up, and out of what he saw in the 1950s in Egypt and in Israel and in Libya, brought home photographs of young Palestinians and taught us, an Irish family in the middle of Ireland, to love and to respect our beautiful world and humanity, and to work for peace and for an end to war. Presente.
In the foreword to Thich Nhat Hanh's book, Peace is Every Step, the Dalai Lama writes, trying to change the world through personal transformation, one individual at a time, is very difficult, but it's the only way. My father, Albert Jerome Zolkowitz, born 1923, disabled in World War II, died 2006. Presente.
This is for all the veterans who perished, not just the Vietnam veterans, but the veterans during World War I, World War II, up until that time frame, as well as all the 87 plus wars that America has engaged in after World War II. but this is for all the veterans who have passed away. And I'm grateful and thankful to say that I am an Air Force veteran that has been able to tell the story that I did survive, but this is for all the ones that perished.
This is for my cousin Tommy Sandstrom, who was 22 when he was killed in Vietnam. I just wanted to say his name, Hugh Thomas Sandstrom. I want to honor Sadiq. He was with the Mumia movement, but before that he was a war veteran. So I want to honor him on this day. And he was a great civil rights fighter for civil rights.
I want to honor two women. One was a military veteran. She was my mother. She was a WAC in World War II, and she was the guiding light of my early life and taught me to stand up for what I believe in. And the other was not a military veteran, but she was a warrior. And her name is Gail Miller. And she was a warrior for peace, for justice, and she died this year.
Hello everyone, I am very happy to be here today. 2 summers ago, I moved to upstate New York, very, very close to Canadian border. Yesterday, I drove down about 7 hours. I've seen small cemeteries here and there, a lot of tombstones with American flags, which represent those who perished in past wars and present wars. And I think of rural area of this country. There are so many young people who have nowhere to go after high school but military. And currently, due to the war, our government passed $40 billion from our tax money to be sent to be continued horrible war. Why are we doing this? Weapons cannot buy peace. Peace can be achieved by diplomacy, discussion, negotiation, but it seems like no one has that intention among the representatives of our government. We all voted, right? And this was a bipartisan decision. Can you believe it? Are they really representing us? It's a big question, right? So I would like to dedicate this flower to those who perished from the countryside, rural area of the United States, who could have been served in much better way. They could have been beautiful scientists or agricultural inventors, whoever to explore a beautiful, peaceful world instead of losing their lives in the war. I would like to also dedicate this flower to war journalists who selflessly got into the war zone and tried to report the real war situation that our mainstream media do not let us know. Thank you very much, and presente.
Thank you all for being here today for our commemoration of Memorial Day. I'd like to recognize all of us who are peacemakers and also ask you just to recognize the flag on the coffin is the flag that was on my father's coffin after he was killed on Guam in 1944. I lived right as a war orphan, so we think a lot about individuals who died and how they suffered. And I would remind all of us that the impact of war continues on everybody in this country. We all bear responsibility for the war. We also have responsibility to bring peace to the world. We have over 200 military bases across the world. We say bring the United States troops home, bring the U.S. home, and stop the war on our communities and in the world. So in memory of my father who led me throughout my life to work for peace, thank you all for being here. Love you all, and remember, this is one day of our long walk forward for peace and social justice in the world. We can do it. We have to do it. Thank you.
Young girls everywhere. When will Where have all the men gone?